You think you know your life. You think you've built something solid. Then, one quiet Tuesday, a single text message shatters it all. I remember the smell of stale coffee that morning, a weird counterpoint to the growing dread in my gut. Emily had been different these past 2 weeks, like a ghost in her own skin, leaving whispers of unease in her wake. Her phone, once an open book, was suddenly guarded by new passwords, a digital fortress around a secret I hadn't yet named. Was it just the stress of her new office job, or something far more insidious? Her late nights at work became a recurring melody, a tune I was trying to ignore, though my ears rang with its false notes. When she finally stepped into the shower, the steam carrying the scent of her lavender soap, I knew. It wasn't a choice. It was an involuntary lurch, my hand reaching for her phone as if guided by an invisible string. My thumbs fumbled, a strange mix of revulsion and desperate curiosity churning inside. And then I saw it. A thread, casual at first, then escalating with sickening speed. I love you, from a contact saved as Tom Office. And beneath that, a chilling logistics plan. Can't wait for your shift to start. Your place is perfect after 7. My blood ran cold, a glacial river through my veins. They'd been in our home, my sanctuary, while I was out turning wrenches, making an honest living. Had she really just used our bed? The air thickened around me, suddenly heavy and suffocating. A few scrolls later, the casual mentions of last time and how good it felt confirmed the depths of the betrayal. I stood there, the cool porcelain of the bathroom sink against my palm, a hollow ache blossoming in my chest. Jake, my name. It felt alien in that moment, a label for someone who no longer existed. The world had tilted on its axis. That evening, Emily, probably alerted by some screenshot notification I'd unwittingly triggered, confessed. Her voice was flat, devoid of real remorse. It's over, she'd insisted, claiming she'd blocked him, citing my lack of attention as her excuse. He made me feel alive, Jake. There was a spark, as if our 5 years, our daughter Lily, meant nothing. Did she truly believe that? Or was this just another layer of manipulation? The scent of scorched earth filled my nostrils, not from outside, but from within. I loved her. How could she do this? How could I have been so blind? This wasn't just a wound. It was a gaping maw. The quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen sounded like a mockery. What kind of person makes their family a casualty of their own selfish whims? Her eyes, usually so clear, were clouded with something I couldn't quite decipher, a flicker of defiance hidden beneath a veneer of regret. A viper in the grass, coiled and ready to strike again. I knew, even then, this was only the beginning that IT took a Herculean effort to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Every smile, every casual touch, felt like a performance worthy of an Oscar. The air in our small home, once filled with laughter, now felt charged with unspoken truths, thick with the unsaid. I still remember the metallic tang of fear in my mouth each morning, wondering if today was the day the facade would crack. Reddit became my grim confessor, a sea of anonymous voices shouting, "Divorce her," and a scattering of "Try therapy for Lily." Lily, our 4-year-old angel, her innocent joy the only beacon in my suddenly dark world. Her laughter, a chime in the otherwise silent house, was the only thing that kept me from shattering. Could I truly blow up her world just because mine had imploded? Was it fair to her? I spoke to my family, carefully, vaguely. My brother, a lawyer, confirmed South Carolina's adultery laws, a grim silver lining in the storm. If proven, it could prevent Emily from claiming alimony, a small victory in a war I hadn't asked for. So I made a plan. A cold, calculated decision born of desperation and a burgeoning need for control. We would pretend, for Lily's sake, until after Christmas and her birthday. No need to taint her holidays with our adult mess. The thought felt both noble and utterly barbaric. We went to therapy, Emily and I. A Zoom therapist, a calm, disembodied voice named Dr. Evans, who spoke of rebuilding trust and shared responsibility. I stared at the pixels on the screen, a sardonic grin playing on my lips. Shared responsibility, right? Emily played her part, too, talking about her doubts about our relationship, her confusion. Her voice, surprisingly steady, spoke of a woman genuinely unsure, or a master manipulator. It was hard to tell. Was this what they called gaslighting? The room itself felt like a stage, the air heavy with unspoken lines and false declarations. I felt like a puppet master, pulling the strings of my own agony. A few weeks later, the final nail in the coffin arrived. A fleeting glance at her phone, left carelessly on the kitchen counter, revealed a familiar name in her recent contacts, Tom. She hadn't blocked him. She hadn't stopped. The betrayal wasn't a moment. It was a constant, festering wound. The promise of an ending was just another lie. This wasn't about a spark anymore. This was about a calculated deception, a disregard for everything we had built. My heart, which I thought had already turned to stone, fractured further. The game was over. There would be no more pretending. Mediation. The word itself felt like a clinical dissection of a living thing. We sat across from each other in a sterile office, the air conditioner humming a monotonous tune, an indifferent soundtrack to the dismantling of a life. Emily, surprisingly, agreed to move to Florida. Perhaps the thought of avoiding alimony in South Carolina was enough of an incentive, or maybe the prospect of a fresh start with Tom, a fantasy she was clearly still clinging to, was just too alluring. Her face was a mask of calculated regret, a performance for the mediator, for herself, perhaps even for me. Did she truly believe her own lies? The whole thing felt like a grim negotiation for a used car, not the fate of my family. I remember the sickly sweet scent of air freshener in that room, a futile attempt to mask the emotional decay. The agreement was reached, full custody of Lily for me, with visitation rights for Emily. It was a victory, I suppose, a legal triumph, but it tasted like ash. Lily, oblivious to the bureaucratic dance determining her future, would remain with me. That was the only thing that mattered. The thought of her waking up without me, or worse, with Emily and him, was a cold spike in my chest. So, I nodded, a silent assent to a future I hadn't chosen, but would now navigate. For years can feel like a lifetime when you're rebuilding. The old Jake, the one who believed in happy endings and undying love, was gone, replaced by someone sharper, colder, more observant. Someone who understood that trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. Lily thrived. She was my anchor, my reason, my constant reminder that even in ruin, beauty can flourish. We built a new life, just the two of us, in a house that finally felt like a home again, free from the ghosts of betrayal. I found a new purpose, something beyond the daily grind, something that allowed me to channel the lingering bitterness into a constructive force. The scars remained, of course, etched deep, but they no longer bled. They simply served as reminders, silent lessons in vigilance. Did I ever regret the path I chose, the path of quiet calculation instead of fiery confrontation? Sometimes. But then I'd look at Lily, sleeping soundly, safe, and the answer became clear. The question wasn't about regret, it was about survival, and justice in its own quiet, insidious way. I often wondered about Emily, about Tom. Did they find their spark in the Florida sun? Did their flimsy romance survive the harsh light of reality? The universe, I've learned, has a funny way of delivering its own brand of karma. And sometimes, you just have to give a little push. A subtle nudge. A gentle whisper in the right ear. Life after Emily's exit felt like walking through a fog that slowly, agonizingly, began to lift. The quiet house was no longer a tomb, but a canvas for a new beginning. We fell into a rhythm, Lily and I, a comforting dance of school runs, bedtime stories, and weekend adventures. The lingering scent of Emily's perfume eventually faded from the bedroom, replaced by the faint, comforting smell of Lily's lavender shampoo and my own aftershave. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. I enrolled Lily in a new daycare, met other single parents, and slowly, cautiously, started to re-engage with the world. Was it easy? Heck no. There were nights I'd sit on the porch, staring at the stars, feeling the gaping hole where a shared future used to be, wondering how I'd let myself be so completely blindsided. But I was learning to be both mother and father, protector and confidant, learning to cook more than just microwave meals, learning that true strength wasn't about avoiding pain, but about enduring it and coming out stronger. I even started picking up extra shifts, saving every penny, a quiet, almost unconscious preparation for something. What that something was, I wasn't entirely sure, but the instinct was strong. Meanwhile, Emily's life in Florida, from what little I gathered through distant family members and the occasional, stilted phone call about Lily, seemed to be, well, sparkling. She mentioned a new apartment, new friends, and a lot of beach trips. Tom was never directly named, but his presence was a silent, unacknowledged shadow. It was about 6 months after she left that I got an email, seemingly out of nowhere, from a firm specializing in digital reputation management. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But something in the subject line, protecting your digital footprint, snagged my attention. A simple click, a brief read, and then a chilling realization. This wasn't just a random marketing email. It subtly referenced unfortunate personal circumstances and navigating complex narratives. It felt too specific, too timely. Could this be connected to Emily? Or was my paranoia just getting the better of me? The thought, once planted, began to sprout. Was this an omen or a carefully placed seed? It made me think about the digital breadcrumbs we all leave behind, the public records, the social media posts, the online reviews. Everything is traceable, accessible, a digital fingerprint of our lives. Who was watching my digital footprint? And why? A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning crept up my spine. The email closed with a seemingly innocuous offer for a free consultation. Free. Nothing is ever truly free, especially when it concerns reputation. It felt like a carefully crafted lure, a spider's silk thread barely visible against the light. Was this an opportunity or a warning? And who was really behind it? The thought gnawed at me, a tiny, persistent insect in the back of my mind. What if this wasn't just about me, but about Emily, about Tom? A new kind of game was unfolding, one I hadn't anticipated. That email, the one about digital reputation management, snagged me like a fish on a forgotten line. It wasn't just spam. The specific phrasing, the subtle hints about navigating complex narratives felt too precise, like it was written for me. For a split second, a weird, unsettling thought. Was this from Emily? Was she so desperate to control her own story now that her spark had fizzled? Or was it Tom, trying to cover his tracks? The mere idea sent a shiver down my spine, a sensation not of fear, but of an almost perverse curiosity. My fingers hovered over the delete button, but a deeper instinct, a cold, calculated whisper, urged me to click. What if this was an opening? A door to something more? The company's website was slick, professional, adorned with buzzwords like algorithmic analysis and online narrative control. It promised to shape perceptions and mitigate negative information. Sounds about right for our modern world, where a single post can ruin a life. I spent hours that night, long after Lily was asleep, digging, not just into the company, but into the broader landscape of digital footprints. It was like peeling back layers of an onion, each one revealing more of the raw, uncomfortable truth. In a digital age, privacy is a myth, and your past is always just a few clicks away. The glowing blue light on my laptop screen reflected in my eyes, two tiny, intense points in the darkness. What if Emily, in her desperate bid to appear innocent, had inadvertently created a trail leading right back to her? Then came the plot twist, not from the company itself, but from a deeper dive into their publicly available client list. Tucked away amongst minor celebrities and small businesses was a name that made my breath hitch: Ascension Realty, LLC. Tom's company. Not directly his name, but his employer. The same Tom who'd been Emily's spark. The coincidence was too jarring, too specific to ignore. Was this merely a legitimate service his company used, or was there a more direct, personal connection? The scent of old paper and dust from the legal documents I'd pulled earlier suddenly seemed to cling to the air, a phantom reminder of past battles. It sparked a question, sharp and insistent. Was this email a mere coincidence or a deliberate, subtle probe from someone who knew exactly who I was and what I'd been through? I considered the implications. If Tom's company used this firm, what kind of information were they trying to suppress or promote? And why had I received an email from them, so targeted, so uncannily relevant to my own unfortunate personal circumstances? It was like a chess piece had just moved across the board, not by my hand, but by an unseen player. The game was far more intricate than I'd imagined. This wasn't just about Emily's betrayal anymore. This was about digital warfare, about reputation and control. A slow, chilling smile spread across my face. Oh, this was going to be fun. This was going to be interesting. I closed the laptop, the sudden darkness almost blinding. The pieces were starting to align. But for what purpose? And whose move was next? The perfect surface always has a flaw. That was my mantra as I began to meticulously pick apart Tom's public persona. If he was a shark in a tailored suit, then there had to be a chink in his armor, a vulnerability beneath the polished exterior. My focus shifted from his social media facade to his professional track record at Ascension Realty. Public records are a treasure trove for those with patience. Property deeds, zoning applications, building permits, each one a digital breadcrumb leading somewhere. The scent of ozone from my laptop became even more pronounced, a constant hum in the quiet of my study as the hours blurred. I started with the controversial zoning dispute mentioned in that old article. It wasn't just about environmental concerns, it hinted at something more. I delved into the public comments, the town hall meeting minutes, the local residents' protests. The story painted a picture of a community pitted against a powerful developer, steamrolled by a system designed to favor those with deep pockets. One name kept popping up, an elderly woman, Sarah Jenkins, whose small, inherited home was directly in the path of Tom's proposed development. She had fought tooth and nail, a tiny David against a corporate Goliath. Her impassioned speeches, recorded in dusty meeting transcripts, spoke of shady dealings and unfulfilled promises. And then, the plot twist. Buried deep in an obscure local county court archive, I found a settlement agreement. Sarah Jenkins had quietly accepted a significantly below-market offer for her property, withdrawing her opposition. The agreement had a curious clause, a non-disclosure statement, preventing her from discussing the terms or the circumstances of the sale. It wasn't outright illegal, but it reeked of coercion, a classic strong-arm tactic to silence dissent. This wasn't just unethical, it was predatory. My fingers tightened on the mouse. How many other Sarahs had he silenced? The subtle aroma of dust from the old court documents I'd pulled online seemed to fill the room, a stale, almost suffocating presence. This wasn't about a spark or a fleeting affair anymore. This was about a pattern of behavior, a blueprint of disregard for others, meticulously drawn by Tom. He wasn't just a cheat. He was a manipulator, a man who crushed lives for profit. The symbolic image was suddenly clear, a crumbling foundation beneath a gleaming skyscraper, hidden for plain sight, waiting to be exposed. The moral ambiguity of my own actions suddenly seemed less important. Did I have a right to retaliate? If someone built their success on the destruction of others, didn't they deserve to have their own carefully constructed world exposed? The answer was a resounding, silent yes. The pieces were falling into place. I had my leverage, and the game, now, was truly on. My gaze drifted to the framed photo of Lily on my desk, her bright, innocent smile a stark contrast to the darkness swirling in my mind. For her, I would make sure justice, however cold and calculated, was served. My next step was clear: find Sarah Jenkins. Finding Sarah Jenkins wasn't as simple as a Google search. Her digital footprint was almost non-existent, a testament to a generation that lived before the internet swallowed everything. I started with property records, tracing her address, then cross-referencing with old phone directories and obituaries, praying I wasn't too late. Eventually, a faint trail led me to a quiet, tree-lined street on the outskirts of what used to be her old neighborhood, now dominated by new constructions. Her house, small and unassuming, stood out amongst the modern monstrosities, a defiant relic of a bygone era. The air hung thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a poignant reminder of time's relentless march. I knocked, a respectful tap, not too aggressive, and waited. A moment passed, then another. Just as I was about to turn, the door creaked open a sliver, revealing a wary eye. "Ms. Jenkins?" I asked, keeping my voice low, calm, non-threatening. "My name is Jake. I'm looking into a matter concerning Ascension Realty, and I believe you might have some valuable insight." The eye scrutinized me, then the door opened a little wider, revealing a petite woman with a face etched with the wisdom of years and a flicker of something that looked like fear. "Come in," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "It's cold out." Her living room was neat, almost painfully so, filled with old photos and a pervasive smell of mothballs and lavender. She offered me tea, and as she poured, her hands trembled almost imperceptibly. I laid out my cards carefully, explaining my interest in the zoning dispute, in Tom's tactics, omitting, for now, my personal connection. I watched her, gauging her reactions. She listened, her gaze distant, fixed on a faded photograph of a young couple on her mantelpiece. And then came the plot twist. "He promised," she said, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes still on the photo. "He promised my Julian, my son, said he'd get him a job at the new development, a good one, with benefits if I just cooperated." Julian, her son, not money, not just intimidation, but a manipulation of a mother's hope for her child. That detail, that insidious promise, twisted the knife in a way simple financial coercion never could. The deeper mystery solidified. Tom wasn't just a ruthless businessman. He was a master manipulator, preying on vulnerability. Sarah's story wasn't just about a house. It was about a broken promise, a son's dashed hopes, and a mother's quiet, enduring pain. The scent of her strong, bitter tea seemed to amplify the bitterness of the story she told. What kind of man uses a child's future as leverage? The symbolic image shifted, not a spiderweb, but a carefully baited trap, invisible to the desperate. "And did Julian get that job?" I asked, my voice flat. Sarah finally met my gaze, her eyes brimming with a silent, profound sorrow. "He never did. Tom Walker, he never called. Not once." The air in the room grew heavy, suffocating with the weight of that unspoken lie. I had found my witness, and she had given me something far more potent than legal documents. A human story, a raw, undeniable testament to Tom Walker's true character. My next move was clear. It was time to give Tom Walker a taste of his own medicine digitally. But how? The question was how. How do you dismantle a carefully constructed reputation without outright breaking the law? How do you expose a shark without getting caught in his teeth? The answer, I realized, lay in the very tools Tom used to build his image: information and perception. He hired a digital reputation firm to polish his brand. I would use the digital world to reveal the cracks. My strategy was cold, precise, and entirely online. No direct contact, no shouting from the rooftops. Just a systematic release of information, carefully curated, perfectly timed. My first move was to create a network of anonymous profiles across various platforms. Not just X or TikTok, but niche community forums, local news comment sections, even obscure real estate investor message boards. Each profile was a phantom designed to be untraceable, a digital ghost in the machine. I fed them bits of information, public records of the zoning dispute, excerpt from Sarah Jenkins's testimony, carefully anonymized, of course, the details of the non-disclosure agreement. It wasn't slander, it was truth, presented without context, designed to raise questions. The soft clicks of my keyboard echoed in the silent house late at night, a rhythmic pulse to my grim work. Then came the plot twist, an unexpected ripple effect. A local blogger, a tenacious amateur journalist who had covered the original zoning dispute, picked up on the sudden resurgence of interest in the Sarah Jenkins case. She noticed the patterns, the subtle connections, the seemingly unrelated posts appearing across different platforms. Without knowing me, she became my unwitting amplifier. Her blog post, "Whatever Happened to Sarah Jenkins?" A forgotten tale of local development, didn't directly accuse Tom, but it laid out the facts, the public records, the ethically dubious settlement. The online world, hungry for drama and injustice, devoured it. The scent of fresh coffee filled the kitchen the next morning, but it tasted of bitter victory. Was this ethical? Using an innocent blogger as a pawn in my game? The question lingered, a faint echo in my mind. But then I thought of Sarah, of Julian's dashed hopes, of Emily's casual betrayal. Fairness was a luxury I'd been denied. The symbolic image was of carefully placed dominoes, a long, intricate line. My touch had been light, almost imperceptible, but the chain reaction was starting. And it wasn't just the blogger. Comments started appearing on Tom's professional profiles, subtle, insidious questions about ethical practices and community relations. His carefully manicured image, once so impenetrable, now had tiny, almost invisible nicks. The wind was beginning to blow, and Tom Walker, I knew, was about to feel the chill. What would his reaction be? And how far would he go to suppress the truth? The digital ripples I'd set in motion became waves, slow but steady, eroding the carefully sculpted image of Tom Walker. The local blogger's post gained traction, picked up by small, independent news outlets, and reshared across various community groups. The comments section, a digital battleground, buzzed with old residents sharing their own grievances about past developments, whispering about backroom deals and broken promises. Tom, the dynamic leader on LinkedIn, was becoming that guy from Ascension Realty who pushed out old folks. The taste of cold, quiet satisfaction lingered on my tongue. I watched his social media presence like a hawk. For a few days, silence. Then, a sudden flurry of positive posts, strategically timed articles about Ascension Realty's commitment to community development, and curated photos of Tom at charity events. Classic damage control. He was deploying his digital reputation firm, just as I'd suspected. The faint hum of my server rack, working tirelessly in the background, felt like a co-conspirator. But I knew their playbook. I'd researched them, understood their tactics. This wasn't just about putting out fires. It was about shifting the narrative. But you can't shift a narrative if the foundation is rotten. And then came the plot twist, not from my direct action, but from Tom's frantic attempts to counter. One of the new positive articles, published on a seemingly innocuous local business news site, included a quote from an anonymous former associate praising Tom's ruthless efficiency and unwavering focus on the bottom line. It was meant to sound like a compliment, but to anyone with an ounce of critical thinking, especially after reading the other stories, it sounded like a confession. It backfired spectacularly. The comment sections exploded, linking ruthless efficiency directly to Sarah Jenkins' story. The public smelled blood. The air in my office felt electric, charged with the unfolding drama. Was this what they called poetic justice? Using his own tools, his own arrogance against him? The symbolic image now was a crumbling sandcastle, carefully built but ultimately vulnerable to the tide. The deeper mystery was how truly oblivious Tom was to his own reputation, how much he truly believed his own hype. Did he think money and PR could whitewash anything? It made me wonder about Emily. Was she watching this digital unraveling? Was her spark dimming now that the man she chose was being exposed for the predatory individual he was? The subtle shift in online sentiment was unmistakable. Questions about Ascension Realty's ethical practices started appearing in industry forums, not just local ones. Tom's professional world, his true fortress, was beginning to feel the tremors. The ground beneath his feet was becoming unstable, and I knew exactly how to make it crumble. What was the most vulnerable point in a developer's career? His next big project. And I knew just the one that the city council's review was the crack, and the public outcry was the sledgehammer. The Azure Tower became a symbol, not of luxury, but of corporate greed and ethical negligence. Investors, wary of bad press and potential legal battles, started pulling out. Financial reports became a public record of Tom Walker's spiraling fortune. The whispers turned to shouts, the subtle questions to outright accusations. Tom, the man who prided himself on control, watched his empire crumble, not with a bang, but with the slow, agonizing drip of collapsing deals and shrinking bank accounts. I saw snippets on the news, photos of him looking haggard, his polished mask finally shattered. The taste in my mouth was not of triumph, but of a quiet, almost melancholic satisfaction. Emily. Her reaction was the final piece of the puzzle. She called me, not to rage, but to weep. Her spark had extinguished. Tom, it turned out, wasn't just losing his money. He was losing his mind, consumed by the public humiliation, blaming everyone but himself. Emily's new life in Florida, built on the shifting sands of a philanderer's false promises, had dissolved. She was alone, scared, and, for the first time, truly seeing the man she'd chosen over her family. She offered apologies, choked out between sobs, for everything. For the betrayal, for the lies, for the pain she'd caused. Her voice, once so self-assured, was now a fragile whisper, thin as smoke. The scent of rain on dry asphalt outside my window seemed to cleanse the air, washing away the lingering traces of the past. Did I have the right to do what I did? The question lingered, a quiet echo in the stillness of my thoughts. I hadn't resorted to violence, or crime, or even direct confrontation. I had simply held up a mirror, using the very tools they wielded against others. I used information, truth, and the inescapable power of public opinion. And a moral dilemma? It felt less like a burden now, and more like a necessary truth. Justice, I learned, isn't always served in a courtroom. Sometimes it's a quiet, cold calculation, a systematic unraveling of a life built on deceit. The symbolic image was of a meticulously restored old house, no longer perfect, but solid, honest, and truly a home. For years since the chaos, and Lily thrived. She was happy, secure, growing into a bright, independent young girl. My focus had shifted entirely, not to revenge, but to building a life of integrity, of quiet purpose. I'd started volunteering at a community center, helping young men navigate tough choices, sharing lessons learned from a past I wouldn't wish on anyone. This was my new mission, my new spark. I even contemplated getting a coffee with a few folks in Columbia, South Carolina, who might be going through their own version of hell. Not to boast, not to gloat, but perhaps to offer a quiet nod, a silent understanding that even after the storm, there is always a new dawn.